Welcome to the discussion. My guest today is John DeSimone, the Vice President for Cybersecurity, Training, and Services at Raytheon Intelligence and Space. John, welcome back to the program.
Jay's great. Thanks to be here.
Let me set just a little bit of context for our discussion today. Securing data and applications in the cloud is not a turn it on and leave it alone type of approach. In fact, according to Gartner, over the next 3 years, at least 95% of cloud security failures will be the customer's fault. Now, this model requires agencies and commercial cloud providers to understand and clearly identify their responsibilities, both individually and where they overlap. At the center of this approach are the people and the trust relationship. Experts say trust erodes when customers misunderstand the role and responsibilities of the cloud provider. The challenges for many public and private sector organizations is making sure they know what's expected of them around the varying security requirements between infrastructure, platform, and software cloud environments. Agencies need to acknowledge the risks they are accepting and what steps they and their partners are taking to mitigate them. The Center for Internet Security recommends 3 steps to help organizations move into the shared responsibility model. I'm sure there's more, but here's the 3 they laid out. Prevent common cyber attacks by ensuring you're addressing all the common cyber hygiene factors. Implement a common standard. CIS says you can start by reviewing all of your system's configurations and implement secure recommendations. And evolve with the cloud. Take advantage of those updates the cloud provider provides and understand how they'll impact your systems. Sounds easy, right? Well, not so much. And that's where my guest is going to come in, offering some practical tips for taking benefits of the shared responsibility model for cloud services. Once again, my guest today is John DeSimone, the Vice President for Cybersecurity, Training, and Services at Raytheon Intelligence and Space. Now, John, I laid out this idea of shared responsibility, but let's talk a little bit more about that. Why is this coming up? Why is there a misunderstanding?
It's a great question. I mean, obviously, cloud and its inception, when it started, it was meant to be a very magical thing to a lot of different people. It was going to solve a lot of different problems, but it was definitely meant to be a simpler approach to providing infrastructure to businesses. And it has absolutely done that. When you get into the security aspect, the responsibility is shared because there's the infrastructure piece, which the providers are responsible for securing, but your data, when it goes in the cloud, is your responsibility to make sure it's secure and be able to understand where it is, who's accessing it, and that's not well known to a lot of businesses, especially if you, from a maturity scale, if you get young businesses or early stage businesses that are going in there, and then when you get into larger enterprises, it becomes more complex because of the systems that ride in the cloud and out of the cloud. So it's definitely something that's not well known. It's a complicated situation, and you have to make sure that you, as the customer and the consumer of the cloud, you are ultimately responsible for your data, and you need to make sure you understand what the cloud providers are providing for you and what you need to provide to make sure your data is secure.
All right, but John, let me play the devil's advocate for a second, right? But I'm trusting the cloud provider to do their job, right? I'm giving you my data. Give is maybe not the best word, but I'm allowing you to kind of control my data, work on my data. Give me a sense. Why is this? What's the disconnect happening? Because, if I give the bank my money, I'm not responsible for protecting my money in the bank, am I?
Well, here's the complexity that you're dealing with in the cloud, and it's interesting because there's the technical aspect of it, and then there's the policy or legal aspect. So the cloud providers are absolutely, their policies are going to be very clearly laid out that you need to understand. That says, hey, I'm not responsible for these things, and let me say it this way: here's what I'm responsible for. Here's what you need to be responsible for, and your data is your data. Now they'll be happy to sell you tools to help you do, or enact your security policies or your controls, or provide you additional services that you can use to secure your data. But they're going to be very, very clear, and it's a smart business decision. They're going to take a very clear legal position on what they're accountable for and what you are. And there's not a lot of incentive, if you will, for them to change that policy. There's incentive for them to provide you more tools that you can buy from them to help you enact your responsibility to protect your data. But they're really, really clear on that. And you're in the shared infrastructure model, so they can get away with a little bit of that leverage because you're paying, reduced costs, if you will, from an OpEx versus a CapEx if you're, providing infrastructure yourself. So you're getting that benefit and being able to see, clearly what your services cost and get some visibility into that. but you're taking on that accountability, and there's not a lot of pressure on them to expand their responsibility to you in that aspect.
All right, John, here's a crazy question because I'm going to go down the path with my bank analogy for a second again. Do we need an FDIC for security in the cloud? Do we need somebody like a government organization? And I know this is kind of out there that would do some sort of, assurance. I don't know. Is that
Yeah, no, I don't think. I mean, it's an interesting question. I'm not, for the, I'm definitely for some definite. Excuse me, I'm definitely for some changes in how government regulates cyber. I think the government's hopefully going to start moving in a direction where we can enact some policies to help the organizations share threat information. But as far as regulating what's in the cloud, no, absolutely not. I think the issue is, you know, organizations need to be accountable, and I think it's more of an understanding of that, and it's a maturity level of what tools that they can start to enact to make sure that their accountability to their data, obviously, that they can in a more efficient and streamlined process secure that and secure and protect their enterprise's most valuable possession, which is their data. Right now, people don't understand that, and I think the issue is they purchased cloud security platforms, which are very good, but it doesn't solve the entire problem. So they purchase those cloud security platforms, think that they're protecting their data, and they are to a certain degree. But the more complicated their enterprise becomes, the more vulnerable they are, and the more vectors of attack that open up for them. And if they don't really understand that, then they're vulnerable and bad things happen. So I think it's really along the lines of educating consumers that, hey, you really do own your data, and you absolutely can move things into the cloud, but you're responsible for your enterprise data protection, which may include on-prem, cloud, mobile devices, laptops, whatever the case may be your enterprise uses, and you need a holistic approach for securing that information.
John, I wasn't trying to insinuate we need some sort of regulation for the cloud. I just maybe took my bank analogy a little further. But let me take a step back, because when you talk about securing your data in the cloud, when you talk about securing applications and mobile devices and the like, you talk about that enterprise approach. What does that enterprise approach look like? And of course, are we talking about data encryption or zero trust or all of the above?
I think it's all the above, but it's all the above in the right quantities with the right platform or framework, and a kind of a holistic architecture that guides everything you deploy. And that's really what zero trust and the zero trust platform is, right? So you're going to have the information in the cloud, you're going to have information on-prem, especially if you're a large agency or a large enterprise. And what you really need to be able to do is orchestrate between these security platforms on a transaction by transaction basis, so that you can ensure that your information is protected and it's being acted on appropriately at each step of its life cycle in your enterprise. And that's essentially what zero trust is. You make the assumption that you've been breached or you are being breached, so the bad actors are outside and inside your network. You still put your security policies in place, obviously, and you still purchase, whether it's cloud security platforms or encryption or different types of trusted boot applications for your devices. But you need to make sure those can be tied together on a transaction by transaction from a data view in order to be successful. And I think the key is, just like we said, it's a shared model in the cloud. You have to understand, I think the customers really have to be able to take the view that they are the integrator. Like, you are the integrator, like it or not. And you can't just holistically hand that to any one vendor. You are the integrator across all your devices, all your data, all your platforms, and you need to make sure you have the appropriate approach to ensure its security.
That's a much different piece for a lot of agencies, a lot of organizations, to be that integrator, right? I mean, previously, if you think about the old way of security, the perimeter security, you just put everything at the perimeter, and it didn't necessarily matter if the tools worked together. You had your antivirus, you had your firewall, you had other things, but if they didn't work together, you're probably okay. Is that a different mindset for a lot of agencies, to say we got to make sure that there's an interoperability piece that's happening?
I think it is as it relates to security, and this conversation we're having. I mean, obviously, people have used integrators for different things in the past, but I think, to the point you're making, as threats have arisen over the past years, a tool set comes out to attack it, or it's a sensor on the edge to pick up this type of data. And then you have your SIMs that are supposed to be correlating and you doing your alerts and awareness. But for each complex system that you put online, right, as more of the enterprise systems becomes more and more dynamic and more complex, it adds another vector of attack. It adds another complexity or another sensor you may want to be looking at for behavior, right? And you can't just keep shooting at each target that pops up. I mean, the reality is these things have to be pulled together as a whole. And you do need to take an integrated approach and say whether they want to be the integrator themselves or they want to contract to a company to be on point to pull all of these tool sets together, all of where their data resides from an orchestration and a management standpoint to be able to manage it on a transaction basis, or you're never going to really address the problem holistically.
We do hear a lot about this hybrid cloud environment that a lot of agencies and organizations will continue to be in over the next 3, 5, 7 years or longer. Does that add a complexity to this ability to secure data, or is it just as complex if you're on premise or if you're totally in the cloud? I mean, that's the zero trust piece, because it doesn't really matter where you are. It's whether it's really focused on that data piece versus focused on the infrastructure piece.
Yeah, I mean, so it depends. Like obviously, hybrid clouds, it depends on exactly what the makeup is, but absolutely, I think most, I don't know what percentage, but I would think most mid to large agencies are going to be in some form of hybrid. If you consider an on-prem to off-prem, doesn't always mean you're going to be in multiple vendor shop. Like we really believe, having a neutrality in your cloud providers, like having certain things run in Azure and certain things run in Amazon, having that type of neutrality just for neutrality's sake is something we just don't believe in. The cost of multiple service offerings, the cost of the skill sets required on both platforms, this doesn't justify the benefits unless there's a business imperative. Like if you have a workload that runs better in one than the other, then the business imperative may drive that. But from a security or an IT cost structure, there's really not a strong value proposition for that type of neutrality. But obviously having hybrid cloud from a Amazon to a private stack or something that's going to be more that's a legacy platform inside of an enterprise, we believe that's really most enterprises are going to be that way. So you're going to have to be able to deal with how do you secure your data in the cloud platform environments, how do you secure it on-prem, and as it transfers back and forth, how do you manage that secure transmission?
All right, John, on that note, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we can continue our conversation. You're listening to the discussion Shaping the Future of Secure Cloud, sponsored by Raytheon on Federal News Network.